All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this webinar for registered accessible media producers with the NIMAC. My name is Liz Schaller, and I am the NIMAC manager, and I am co-hosting today with Nicole Gaines, who is the NIMAC project director. And we're very happy to have you all here today. So today's webinar is going to be broken down into two parts. The first part is some PowerPoint slides that we're going to go through. I'm going to cover the first part of that, the sort of basics of the NIMAC, the background information, the types of files we receive, how you'll access those files, as well as some recent policy updates. And then I'm going to hand it over to Nicole, who's going to cover the system features that are specific to AMPS. And then she's also going to do a live demo in the system and demonstrate how to do those things that we're going to walk through during the PowerPoint. So let's go ahead and get started. And like I said, I will pause a couple times throughout for questions, and I'll be monitoring the chat. So feel free to pop those in the chat at any time. So first, let's go over some of the background information about the NIMAC project. The NIMAC was created by IDEA 2004, and it is the National Source File Repository for K-12 textbooks and instructional materials. We make NIMAS files available for use in producing accessible formats for K-12 instructional materials. To date, we have over 67,000 file sets from almost 160 publishers. And we're happy to say that all 50 states, plus 6 outlying areas and the Department of Defense work with the NIMAC. So what is this file format that we receive, this NIMAS file? NIMAS stands for the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard. The file format is an XML-based source file format. It is designed for use in producing formats such as Braille, DAISY, EPUB, and large print. It is not intended for distribution directly to students. NIMAS is the only file format that we receive from publishers. And it's important to note that NIMAS is not simply a byproduct of print or digital book production. And so it can take publishers up to 6 weeks or sometimes even more to produce NIMAS for an instructional materials request. How do we receive the files? So under IDEA 2004, the only mechanism to require NIMAS from the publisher is that book adoption contract or purchase agreement. So there is no blanket requirement for publishers to submit files to the NIMAC. States and districts have been able to require NIMAS when they purchase new textbooks since 2006. And ideally, when NIMAS is included in contracts, a file will be already available in the system when an accessible format need is identified. What types of materials do we receive? So the NIMAC receives a wide range of student-facing instructional materials. These can include textbooks, workbooks, supplementary readers, as well as ancillary materials such as Blackline Masters. There are materials that are exempt from the NIMAC, and those include teachers' editions of textbooks, titles that are pre-2006, trade books, college textbooks, and reference books. And we can also now accept NIMAS files for some digital instructional materials. And if you're curious about that, we have more information on our website, and feel free to send us any questions at all. So what is a NIMAC authorized user? An authorized user is someone who has been designated by their NIMAC state coordinator to have an account that provides full access to the NIMAC repository. They're able to search and download files or assign files to registered accessible media producers. These individuals are generally from within the educational structure of the state, so an IRC or State Department of Education. What is an AMP account? An accessible media producer account allows a user to download any file assigned to them by an authorized user. These accounts are freely available to any organization or individual who can work with NIMAC to produce accessible formats for K-12 students with print disabilities. These users do not have to be designated by a state coordinator, but they do have more limited access to download files. If you do need that more direct access to download files from the system, it might be appropriate for you to be designated as an authorized user for a given state. To become an authorized user, you do need to be part of that educational structure of the state or a nonprofit that qualifies as an authorized entity under Chafee. Again, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about that, or if you'd like more information about what it would mean for you to become an authorized user. All right, so let's talk a little bit about NIMAC file assignments. Once you have an active AMP account, any authorized user in any state can assign you files for download. If you're working on a project for a state or district and need help locating an authorized user in that state to assign you the NIMAC file, please let us know and we can connect you. When you are assigned a file by an authorized user, the system is going to send you an automated email to let you know that that file is available for download in your queue. And that notification will let you know what item has been assigned, what accessible format is being requested, and what user made the assignment. And just to note, that accessible format that's being requested, that's not necessarily like a contractual obligation of any kind. If you've had a conversation with that authorized user already, and their request doesn't reflect what you had talked about, you're not required to produce just the accessible format that they listed in their item assignment to you. And this is a screenshot here of the email that you'll receive when you get that file assignment from the authorized user. And just a quick heads up that the automated emails that you receive from the NIMAC will show as the sender no reply-NIMAC@overdrive.com. And we do know that some email systems will filter out automated emails, so you may need to whitelist this sender and add that address to your contacts. We know occasionally school districts have even more restricted email systems, so you may actually need to reach out to your IT administrator if you're still having issues receiving those system emails. And if you still can't get to the bottom of it, definitely feel free to reach out to us for more assistance. All right. Does anyone have any questions before we move into to the policy updates? I don't think I'm seeing any in the chat. Okay, great. All right, so just a few quick updates from us then. So last year in February of 2021, the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled updated its eligibility guidelines. And the changes to the guidelines included expanding the pool of professionals who can certify eligibility and eliminating the requirement that a medical doctor certify eligibility for individuals with reading disabilities. Since IDEA 2004 points to the NLS guidelines for NIMAC eligibility, those changes also affected the NIMAC. To align our agreements with the new NLS guidelines, the NIMAC sent out updated limitation of use agreements to all users last year. So if you were already registered with the NIMAC, then you should have received an email back in the fall with that updated limitation of use agreement. To update your agreement, please download the limitation of use agreement. I'll pop that link in the chat here shortly. Initial each page and fill in section 14.0. You can email us that signed document at nimac@aph.org or mail in a hard copy. We are also very happy to announce that we can now accept authenticated digital signatures. We're sorry for the inconvenience of having to print and sign the hard copy if you already did that for us. So if you do have DocuSign or Adobe Digital Signatures or some other signature software available to you, feel free to complete the LUA that way and get it back to us if you have not done so already. And now I'm going to hand it over to Nicole.
Great. Thanks, Liz. As Liz mentioned, my name's Nicole Gaines. I think I know some of you guys, but not everyone. So welcome to the NIMAC if you are a newer accessible media producer. I'm going to talk a little bit now about some features in the system, and then we will talk, we'll actually take a little spin through the accessible media producer account and look at the different services and system features that are available to you. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the Watchlist service. This is something that is relatively new for accessible media producers, even though it's been available in authorized user accounts for a very long time. And basically, the watch list itself is a way to track when we have received an item and to get notified if there is an item that's not yet in the NIMAC, but you're interested in it. So that watch list has been in the system for a long time, but just a couple of years ago, we decided to build on that and provide a new service where we will automatically research any item that is added to the watch list and see if we can expedite that material for you. So this was offered to authorized users as of, I believe, May of 2019. And then we just last year, I believe, or possibly in 2020, made it available to AMPs as well. So basically, the reason for us offering this service is that if there's a file that's not in the NIMAC, you're probably not going to have any way of knowing, should it be in the NIMAC? Was it included in a contract? Does it qualify? There are a lot of areas that can be gray areas in terms of materials that we receive versus materials that we don't receive. So we wanted to really just take the guesswork out of that and provide a way for folks to just request materials that they need, and then we'll do the footwork, we'll research that item and see if we can get that for you. So basically, you just go to the watch list link in your system. That will take you to a page where you can add that ISBN. And as I mentioned, we'll talk about that in a little more detail later on. If the material is within scope, and again, that means as long as it's not in an exempt category, such as a college textbook or, you know, a HarperCollins trade book that is not published primarily for the school market, we will request it from the publisher. And the other nice thing about that is if it is material that we've already received or we're waiting for a correction, we can give that publisher or that conversion vendor a nudge and say, hey, there's an immediate need for this. Can you speed up the corrections? Or if it's in our processing queue, we can move it to the top of the queue to get that certified for you right away. So when that material is available, the system will send you an automated email and let you know, hey, this ISBN that you were waiting for, it's now available and can be downloaded. At that point, you know, you can let your authorized user know, hey, this file that I was waiting for, it's available, please assign it to me, and then you'll be able to download it. If the material is outside of scope, we will also provide some additional research for other accessibility alternatives and try to provide that information back to you. Sometimes that comes up, for example, with if it's a college textbook, the good news is that most college publishers do provide other mechanisms to request an accessible format through their own rights and permissions offices. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit is Mathml and NIMAC, and specifically the no Mathml download option that's available in the system. If you're not super techie, don't worry about the technical details of this, but Mathml is basically just a way of capturing math content in the NIMAC file in a way that's not images. The benefit of Mathml is that if you have software that can support it, you can automatically use that code to generate Braille math, or use it in other formats, for example, to create digital audio. If you had production software that recognized Mathml to create audio. In the past, both in printed textbooks and then also in NIMAC files, math expressions were most generally provided as images. And as you guys will know, if you work with producing Braille, at least, you know, if you're just producing perhaps something like EPUB or large print, if you have those types of formats that you don't need an audio rendition or Braille rendition, you know, those images are going to work fine for some formats, but they can't automatically be converted into Braille or audio, for example. So Mathml it offers an additional benefit, but the caveat here is that not all software supports Mathml. You know, we had kind of hoped that there would be a little bit more adoption of Mathml in conversion software, but it has been very slow, and as of today, it's still fairly limited. There's software out there that can work with Mathml, but a lot of software still can't. So what does this mean for you as an accessible media producer? Well, basically, if you have Braille translation software or some other type of software that you're using and it can't work with Mathml, you know, and it either skips that content or garbles that content, you can choose to download the file without the Mathml. So this is a kind of a conversion that we offer that happens behind the scenes. And what you will get if you choose that option is a file that looks exactly like a file that just had the math included as images from the beginning. And we'll show you where you'll see that in the demo. We'll show you where to look for that when you actually go to download a file. So one question that we occasionally have gotten in the past is, well, how do I know if the file has Mathml and I need to be concerned about this? Well, one of the basic ways is that you're only going to see that no Mathml download option if Mathml is present in the file. Otherwise, it won't be there, and so you'll know that you don't have to think about it. So there's that way to know. And then there are also a couple of other ways of being able to determine that. One of them is by looking at the information in the system record for the file, or you can also, if you've already downloaded the file, you can actually find out just by looking at the top of the XML file. So just to kind of take a quick look at all three of those options, this is a screenshot here that shows what your download options are going to look like if the file does include Mathml. And I've circled here in red that the second option, which says full download, no Mathml. And so again, what that means is that you would download the file and it would include images and no Mathml code, so that you don't have to worry about supporting that type of code in your conversion software. The second option, again, is if you go to the full record detail, and you can always get to this information if you click the title, if you are in your, if you're in search results, or if you happen to be in your title assignments information. If you just click the title that's found there, you can actually get to the full record or the detailed record for that material. And Mathml is always going to be the last item in the second column of that metadata record. And so if you don't see that there, it means that Mathml is not relevant to that file. It's not present, because if it's not present, then that field will just not show up. And then the third option here is that if you have already downloaded the file and you don't remember or you're not sure, and it's easier to just look at the file, you can open up your XML file in Notepad or another text editor. And if you actually just search for Mathml, M-A-T-H-M-L, you will see at the very top, and in this particular snip, it's highlighted in green, but you'll see that Mathml is referenced several times at the top of the file. We refer to this as the Mathml Declaration. It's just a way that the vendor indicates that this file does include Mathml. So if you don't see this at the top of your Mathml file, you also don't need to worry about it. If there's not a declaration, you will not be seeing Mathml in that file. So the next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, this is a little bit of an aside about a training opportunity that we're going to be offering in a few months. But this is more about working with NIMAC files and the support that may be needed to do this. We're always interested in input regarding training needs that people have with regard to using NIMAC to create accessible formats. But just in terms of the scope of the NIMAC project itself, historically, providing training on how to use third-party software or set up production workflows to create accessible formats has not really been under the purview of the NIMAC. That's been outside of scope for what we do. But we're interested in knowing and exploring possible collaborations with others to provide a little bit more support in that area going forward. So if you have feedback related to that, we would be interested in that input. For the most part, AMPs do rely on proprietary software to produce accessible formats, and a lot of those companies offer their own training and opportunities and so forth. But we do want to find ways that we can support accessible media producers in the work that they're doing. And along those lines, we're really pleased that we're going to be able to offer a special opportunity in late spring, early summer of this year for Braille transcribers. This is a need that folks had shared with us over the course of quite a bit of time, that it would be very beneficial to have some training for users of Duxbury and Braille 2000 who are either new to NIMAC or new to Braille transcribing in general. So in May and June of this year, we're going to be offering some free trainings for transcribers, and we will very soon be promoting that. We've just recently nailed the dates down for those trainings. They will be provided through APH's Access Academy, if you're familiar with that. If you're not, don't worry about it. But they will also be archived so that you will have access to them going forward through the APH Hive. So again, we're just really excited to be able to offer this, and stay tuned for additional details once we start promoting and open the registration for those courses. So the last thing that I wanted to just point out before we head over to the demo portion is that if you haven't ever been to our website, the website address is nimac.us, and there is a specific section of the website that's just for accessible media producers, and it includes resources and archived webinars and PowerPoints, including the webinar that you're attending today and the PowerPoint that we're using today. If it's useful to you, it will also be archived there and available to you to download if you're interested in having it. So before I move on, I just want to see, the next thing that we're going to do is go in and have a little walk through the AMP account. I do want to pause just for a moment to see if there are any questions at this point about anything that we've covered.
We did have a couple of questions in the chat, Nicole. The first one from Caitlin is asking about if you can use Mathml to create NIMAC.
Mathml can absolutely be used to generate NIMAC if you have software that can do that. My understanding is that Duxbury has some Mathml support currently. I'm not sure to what extent, but I can say that Braille Blaster can definitely take Mathml and use Mathml to generate NIMAC. So if you're interested in more about that, give me a ping. I think we have a little bit of information on our website about Braille Blaster and some links out to some training videos for Braille Blaster. But if you have any specific questions about that, just feel free to reach out and we can point you to additional resources.
Great. Thanks. And then Megan had sort of a similar related question asking if a scientific notebook is accessible with Mathml. That's I think like a plugin for Duxbury.
That would be something to ask Duxbury about. I do not know. I do not know. That sounds very promising, though. If they're offering something that looks like it is a Mathml plugin, we would be interested in knowing more about that. We occasionally will go to the websites for the different vendors and try to keep up on the updates for the different versions of software. And I'm not familiar with that particular tool, but if you do find that it is something that supports Mathml, let us know, and we would be happy to promote that on our website as well, just to let folks know that that is an additional tool that's available.
Great, thanks. And then the last question in the chat is from Steve, and Steve asks, who is responsible for maintaining and updating the NIMAC 1.1 technical specification?
That is a very good question. And the people who are actually responsible are Congress and the U.S. Department of Education. Because NIMAC 1.1 is actually a part of the IDEA, there are only two mechanisms to update the specification. One of them is through the reauthorization of IDEA, and the other is through regulatory action through the department. Several years ago, we actually tried to get the department to consider revising NIMAC 1.1, and at that time we were interested in having them allow us to accept EPUB as NIMAC. But for whatever reasons at that time, the department declined to take regulatory action. And so the long and short of it is NIMAC 1.1 is a really old specification at this time. And one of the things that we're excited, eventually we think that reauthorization will happen. And one of the things that is exciting about that is that it will give us an opportunity to think about what the next version of NIMAC should be, what file format is going to really support students the best. And that is something that is on our radar. And I would say if you are a more techie person and you have input on that question, we would be very interested in hearing what your recommendations or what your thoughts are on the future of NIMAC. But we don't anticipate that there's going to be any change probably until reauthorization happens. Thank you for asking about that.
Great, thanks. Those are all the questions that I saw in the chat.
Great. Okay, well, what we're going to do now then is we're going to switch gears and go to our NIMAC test account and just take a little tour here of what you're going to see in the system when you log into your account. So where I'm at right now is the NIMAC login page. You can get to this from the NIMAC website. Probably most folks just choose to go ahead and bookmark this particular page. And one thing that I do like to point out, if you're not in the system a lot, you'll notice that your username is actually going to be of a format where you're going to have a string of characters, .amp.admin. One of the things that can come up sometimes is that people will use the forgot password link, but instead of using their actual login ID, they'll use their email address. And so I always like to just highlight that we all have tons of logins and passwords for a million things these days, and most of the time our username is going to be an email address, but that's not the case for the NIMAC. If you ever find that you can't locate your login ID or you can't remember it, just give us a call or send us an email and we're happy to look that up for you. That's just kind of an aside in terms of something that's a little more unique for the NIMAC than it was when we first set up the system. So when you log in, what you're going to see is that your landing page is always going to be your title assignments. That's what you're going to see in the middle of your page here, and it's going to be in a chart format. And we're going to talk about that in detail in a moment in terms of managing those assignments and downloading from the system. But before we do that, I'd like to actually move us up to the upper right-hand corner and talk about some other pieces of the system and some optional features that you might find useful. So I'm going to just hit on those real quickly. The first one is under user information. There are two options, and the first one is My Account. And this is a place where you can go if you want to review your information. And Liz kind of referred earlier to format capabilities and that you're not necessarily restricted to producing a format that an authorized user asks for. That's really for informational purposes only. It's more of a convenience in communicating with the authorized user. But I do like to highlight that when you go in and look at your user information, the format capabilities that you'll see, those are based on the information that you provided to the NIMAC when you set up your account. So if you haven't reviewed that in a while, you might want to take a look at it. It's possible that you've added new formats, or there may be formats that you don't offer anymore, and we can make those updates and those edits for you in the system if you need them. In order for us to keep on top of things, you will see that you can click show details here to look at your organizational contact information. And then there's also your primary account holder email and phone number over to the left. You're not able to actually edit that information because we like to be able to ensure that we have that correct in different places in our system. So if you need to make any changes to those or to the format capabilities, again, just let us know. One thing that you can do from this screen, though, is you can change your password. So if you're interested in doing that, there's a little button here over toward the left, and you can use that to change your password. So that's where you're going to get your overall agency information if you are the admin user for the account. Another option that you have from this tab is it's called My Sub-Users, and this is a place where you can actually go and add additional users for your AMP account if that's something that's useful for you. Some AMPs, you may be an individual Braille transcriber and you don't work with anybody else, so this may not be relevant for you. But if you happen to work in an organization or for an agency that has additional staff and you would like for those folks to have their own login and password, this is where you can go to do that. So in my test account here under sub-users, you see that I have one user that's set up, and it's actually very simple and straightforward. There's the user's name, the email address, and then the login ID. You can view what the system has set up as the login ID for that person. Under the last column, you'll see that there is an option for some actions for these users. And you do have the ability, if you have a sub-user and you need to edit their name or their email address, you can choose edit from this menu and make those edits. So you are able to edit those folks. You can also reset their password for them, or if they are no longer at your organization, you can click delete and just delete that user. So pretty simple, pretty easy to manage. And you will notice over to the right, there is an add user button. And if I click that, again, it's very simple. All you need is a first name, a last name, and an email address. And when you click Save Changes, that person will automatically be emailed a login ID and a password, and they're good to go. The other thing that's really nice about the sub-users for your account is that they don't expire. If you happen to be also, there are a small number of folks who are accessible media producers, but may also be an authorized user for a state. Those accounts do have sub-users as well, but they are temporary accounts. So for accessible media producers, it's a little nicer because we're able to offer you additional users that are not temporary. You can keep them as long as you like. So that's it for the user information part. I'm going to jump down now and talk a little bit about the publisher contact information. One of the features that we offer for both authorized users and accessible media producers is that you have access to contact information for every publisher who has materials in the NIMAC. So this is just provided to you as a convenience if there is a need for you to get in touch with the publisher. If you are in this particular screen, it actually is kind of it goes on and on and on. You can choose how many publishers you would like to display, and you can also page through to the display. You can sort by any of the different column headings. And one thing that I like to point out is if they have a particular contact who is a technical contact, and not all publishers do, but if they do, then that will be provided here. In some organizations, they will actually only have an administrative contact, and those folks may or may not be directly involved in NIMAS related work. You can also get to the more detailed information by just clicking the agency name, and then you can kind of scroll through and see all of the detailed contact information for the publisher. In terms of the actual practical applications of this, one of the things that I like to let folks know is that if you have a situation where you need a file, we're going to talk a little in a moment about the watch list and how that can be your best mechanism for trying to get a file that we don't already have. And also, if you have any kind of issue where you're having a technical issue with using a file, we are really happy to help try and troubleshoot any issues like that. So the long and short of it is, this information is here for you and you are welcome to use it, but we also encourage you, if you either need a file or you're having difficulty using a file, to reach out to us. We may be able to facilitate a resolution more quickly for you. The next thing I want to talk about is another feature here that's optional called reports. And we offer the option in the AMP account for you to generate a report of your own download activity. Some folks find that useful, and if you find it useful, it's here for you. So if I click my download activity, that will take me to a page where I can choose a report type. One of them is total downloads, the other is unique by title. Basically, total downloads, that just includes if you downloaded the same title 3 times because you needed it 3 different times, then it will count that. If you just want the unique downloads, you can count that. So then you just choose your start date, your end date, and you have several options for how you would like the report to group the activity. When you click export to CSV, it'll generate that CSV file type, and that's a file type that can be opened in Excel or any other spreadsheet software, and there you have it. So again, if this is helpful, then it's there for you. If you find that you're ever in a position where you need a different type of account, there's some kind of custom account that you need for some purpose, feel free to reach out. We can sometimes get custom reports for users directly from the system vendor. So the last optional feature that I want to mention is the watch list. And again, this is something that we're pretty happy to be able to offer to folks. If I click on Manage Watch List, that's going to take me to a page where I can add ISBNs to a list. And as Liz mentioned, it's when you add an ISBN to this list, the NIMAC staff will automatically research that item for you and let you know how that research goes. We'll either ask for the publisher to provide the file, or if it's not within scope, we can try to provide some other alternatives for you that might be helpful. So I'm just going to enter a number here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I just entered a 13-digit number into the ISBN field, and it will automatically show up in my chart of materials that have been requested. And one of the things that I will point out right away, and that you've probably already noticed, is that this is not a valid ISBN. So one of the things about the way that this function works is that the system doesn't have any way of knowing whether the ISBN is a valid ISBN or a correct ISBN, but you don't really have to worry a lot about that. If we're not able to find the ISBN anywhere online, we'll follow up with you and say, hey, can you provide some additional information about this title? We're not able to determine what this material is. The other things that you're going to see in this chart is if it is an item that's already in the NIMAC, it will show you what the NIMAC identifier is for the item. You'll also see the date that you added it to the watch list and the status. So I'm going to talk a little bit here about the status, because when you add an item to your watch list, there are basically 3 different possibilities for what you might see. So for the number that I just added, I see the status is not submitted to the NIMAC. That's probably going to be the most common status that you see. If it's not something that you're finding in the NIMAC, probably not submitted. But 2 other possibilities are, wow, it looks like one of the ones I added earlier has already been certified I didn't mean for that to happen. Okay, so I'm going to take this opportunity to say, if you see something that says certified by the NIMAC, it was certified after you added it to the NIMAC. And when an item is certified, you will automatically get an email to let you know. So the system will not let you add to your watch list an item that's been certified. It will tell you this item is already available. So what this was, what the status ordinarily would be a status that indicates that it is in process. And in process simply means it's been received, it's in the review queue. And in that case, what we'll do is we will be able to see that status as well and automatically expedite that item for review for you. The third possibility is awaiting corrections, and awaiting corrections just means that we received the file, we reviewed it, there was a problem with it, and we're waiting for the publisher to resubmit a corrected file so that it can be certified. So again, the good news there is that if we're waiting on corrections, we can usually give that publisher or the conversion vendor a nudge and get that file for you pretty quickly. So any questions about the watch list? You will see that under actions that once you're finished with the item, once it's been certified, or if you decide, okay, this 88888 is not really a real one, I need to start over, that's not really an ISBN, you can easily just delete these. Sometimes it's a nice thing to just keep the watch list a little more manageable by deleting things once they've been certified. Now, one thing that I will note is that if you delete something from your watch list before it's been certified, you won't get that notification. So you do want to wait until it's been certified before you remove it from the watch list. Okay, well, if there are no questions about the watch list, or if there are any questions about any of the other optional system features, then I'm going to return us to our title assignments and talk a little bit about those assignments and the downloading process. So one of the things I'll point out at this point is you'll see that there is a menu option up there between reports and publisher contact information. That little link will always take you back to your landing page. Or you can also just go and click on the logo for the NIMAC in the upper left, and that will also take you back to your title assignment. So two ways there to just always get back to your landing page for your account. So when we look at the title assignments, we're probably getting pretty familiar with this basic chart format that a lot of the pages in the NIMAC system look like. And in this case, we see for each of the assignments, we see title details, we see format, authorized user, the date assigned, and if it's been downloaded, we'll see a date downloaded. And as with other similar pages, we can also, we can sort by any of these particular columns by just clicking the up and down arrows next to the column label. So just some basic ways that you can organize the data there if that's helpful for you. The other thing that you'll see here at the top is that you have an active queue and you have a completed queue. What this basically indicates for you is that your file assignments never actually go away. You always have access to them. But if you have downloaded an item and you don't think you're going to need it anymore, you can move items out of your active queue and into what we call the completed queue, just as a matter of housekeeping. If it's optional, you don't have to do it. But if you would like to do it, all you have to do is highlight the item, and you'll notice if I highlight an item, I'm highlighting this first item here, then that will actually activate the two options that I have here. One of them is to move to the completed queue. The other is to add to the downloads. If I click move to completed, then it will automatically jump to the completed queue and will be available there. So in this particular test account, I actually have quite a few materials in the completed queue. And once something is in the completed queue, it cannot be moved, it cannot be downloaded from this queue. But if you decide that you need that item again, something's come up, I thought I was done with it, but I actually need to download it again, you can simply move it back to your active queue and download it again. So you never really lose the ability to have access to these files that you've been assigned. One thing that I'd want to just point out too is that over to the right, you'll see that there's a little box that says search within. That is not anything spiritual or anything like that. It has simply to do with looking for materials inside your queue. And so you can actually search for anything. And then if it's found, then it can just be a way that you can really zero in, especially if you get to the point where you have a whole lot of stuff in that completed queue or in your active queue, you can zero in pretty quickly and find things. So that's basically it in terms of working back and forth between those queues. For downloading, what you can do is it's the same basic deal. And one thing that I wanted to note is that if you are an accessible media producer and you're working on a lot of different things, you've got a lot of different items in your active queue, it is possible to choose more than one file at a time. You're certainly welcome to do that. It's not a problem to do that. You just would want to make sure if you happen to have, 50 or 60 items and you chose select all, you just always want to make sure that if you have a lot more assignments that are down below the bottom of your screen, to be sure to scroll down to make sure you haven't selected a lot of items that you don't really want to download. So in this case, I'm actually not going to download all of them. I'm just going to download the STEM Scopes Texas file. And after I've made my selection here, I just click Add to Downloads. And this is an actual example of what we were talking about earlier, that if you have a file that includes Mathml and you don't want the Mathml, you can choose full download, no Mathml. If you choose just regular full download or regular XML download, you will get the file with the Mathml code included in it. So in this case, we're going to say full download, no Mathml. We could use any, well, actually, for the sake of having a smaller download, we'll just choose XML. And as a clarification on that, in some cases, folks only need the XML file without the images in order to start their conversion process, or depending on the format that's being produced, they may or may not want those images or want those images right away. If you choose the XML download, that will provide you the XML file without the images, and it can just be helpful because those tend to be very tiny files. They are really quick to process and quick to download. So once I've made the selection, I just click I agree that I will abide by the limitation of use agreement. And basically, this is just a scroll through agreement that is it's the same thing that you signed when you got your account. So it's not anything that's any different. We just have this included here because publishers way back in the planning stage of the NIMAC, they said, we'd really like it if you had that limitation of use agreement up there, to remind folks about that at the point of download. And we said, okay, we can do that for you, but it's not anything any different. And once I click I agree, then I will get download request submitted. I will see that I have a system confirmation that tells me that that download is being processed. So now what we're going to do is, you may have noticed earlier on in the demo that there's a tab that says, or a menu item up here, a link that says My Downloads. This is where we're going to go to complete the download process. So I click on that, and this is actually going to take you to your downloads page. And the reason that this is split up is that, as I mentioned earlier, you have the option, if you want to send more than one item to process for download at once, you have that opportunity. Having it split out into these two different pages simply gives more flexibility in terms of having the system process these downloads, and you don't have to wait for it. It happens behind the scenes somewhere else, and it doesn't have any kind of adverse impact on you working in the system while that's happening. So when I go to my downloads, I'm going to see the title details, the type of download that I selected. So for example, the item that I just chose to download, it shows XML, and then the date that I added it to the queue. one of the things about items that are in the download queue or that are on this particular page is that the system will automatically clear these downloads out after 30 days. But you can always go and download the items again if you still need them. That's just kind of a housekeeping thing that's built into the system automatically. And you also, if you see to the right of download, you see a delete button. So you can also delete items from your queue just for your own, if you want to keep things cleared out on your own after you've downloaded them. And so if I actually click download, then it's just going to happen like any ordinary download. I'm using a Windows machine, and so it happens like any other downloaded item. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and remove that from my queue. And if I go back to my title assignments, again, I've removed it from the downloads, but that does not do anything to it being in the active queue. It is still in the active queue and still available if I want to download it again. So that's basically it in terms of our walk through the system, through the different features, through the downloading. Are there any questions about anything that we've covered today, either in the PowerPoint or in the demo portion? Or is there anything in the demo portion that you'd like to see more of, or anything further? We'll just open
I'm not
it up.
seeing any questions in the chat, but again, people at this point, you feel free to unmute and ask your question out loud if you'd rather.
This is Katie Robinson. I'm an accessible material production specialist at Ocala in Ohio. My question is really more looking forward. You're talking about sort of the NIMAC trainings, and I remember there being a proposal for that. What actually ended up being decided upon for these trainings about working with NIMAS files?
Well, the training that we're going to be offering in May and June of this year is we're going to be offering a course for transcribers who use Duxbury, and then a separate course for transcribers who use Braille 2000. And those are going to consist of 5 to 6, roughly 1-hour sessions that cover really the entire textbook transcription process from, here's your NIMAS file and here's your embossed book, using either Duxbury or Braille 2000. So that's basically what we're going to be offering in May and June, and those are already in the works, and we'll be promoting those and opening registration in the coming weeks. Probably maybe in April, we'll start the registration for that. But are there, in terms of training, are there other particular needs that you see in your work that you think would be helpful, more on the side of using NIMAS files?
I will say in my center, we are producing quite a lot of large print. Primarily my requests, I get 5 requests. 4 of them are for large print. I have my own method for producing large print and my own system for formatting, but I have to believe that I can't be the only one with all these large print requests. I have a tool that, for my NIMAS conversions, I do like a manual conversion because I want to control the content, but I do have a tool for automating large print production that I would be willing to share.
That's great to know. And I will say that using NIMAS for large print has historically been really challenging, and I think part of that is that because NIMAS is an XML-based format, your large print, it's really great if you want to reflow the content and make other changes, but if what you're looking for is something that looks exactly like the original book, that's something that's difficult to do with NIMAS. And so just out of curiosity, do you happen to use InDesign, or do you use a different software tool for that?
So I work with a gentleman who is much more of a programmer than myself. We have developed over the years a template and macro system that lays inside Microsoft Word and we've designed our own style sheets and formatting sheets for this large print production. So the NIMAS file itself, I used to use Dolphin Easy Converter, but there's a problem with image compression on that. So we'll do like manual conversion, like make it an HTML file and pull it out in sections. And then we use these templates and macros, and it picks up the heading levels and the body text and everything automatically. But then you can go through and use these proprietary styles that we've programmed to, you can match the print or mirror the print pretty good. We give this away for free to people. So if you're willing to take it, I'm willing to share it.
Wow, well, that sounds great. Well, I think we would definitely be interested in talking with you further about that. And I don't know if, not to put you on the spot, but if you would be interested in having a course possibly offered with the NIMAC for how you do that process, we may be really interested in talking with you about that.
I can drop a link in the chat for the download for it right now if you'd like to see it, but I'm also happy to chat with you later more about it, to explain it a little more, because when you look at it, it's going to look a little bit like information overload, but it's really not too bad when you get into it.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's actually very helpful. Thank you.
I am going to go ahead and stick an exit survey link in the chat. This is something that is important for the NIMAC for our reporting purposes for the Department of Education. So if you could just take 1 minute and go ahead and complete that survey as you're heading out, that would be great. We'd really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. And as Liz mentioned, we really do, we appreciate your feedback. It's very helpful for us as we consider future trainings and help make our trainings and our services and our system better. So thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. And yeah, I think we'll be here for a couple more minutes if there are any final questions or comments.